welcome back to some more Slow Dungeon. What's on the chef's menu? Well, some more boss rush. I think I have two comps in mind that I want to try out. First, I want to just check out the chef's menu, because there is a concept using the eyeball pasta and just stacking damage on the Dark Lord. I think that's a decent way to scale up against the boss rush. But I'm also curious about this, the Dino Egg. So reduce enemy team HP by 25%. If it works like Judgment, where it's 25% of the current HP, useless. If by chance it works as a direct 1/4, so essentially 4 times, if this gets used 4 times, the enemy is done for, that'd be really good. It'd also just be a decent way of getting some damage late game. Overall though, because of the ingredient requirements, I'm not inclined to use this method for boss rush, simply for the fact that I would have to grind up ingredients, which I constantly burn through from mining comps. So, what else do I have in mind then? Well, if we hire these guys back, this is the basic setup I'm going to use. I have 2 alternative layouts on the Tavern Owner. So this first one is prioritizing freezing the bosses rather than survivability. So a general rule of thumb is the Dark Lord can protect 1 person on each side. Because essentially, if 2 people get KO'd on this side, he can only protect 1. If 2 people get KO'd on this one, he can only protect 1. If he himself and someone else gets KO'd, he still triggers his Dark Savior and the Mask, meaning that it's safe. So the idea here is he's always protecting the Wizard and the Mystic, since they're our damage dealers with the Glass Warden. But the Tavern Owner is the missing link, essentially. So with the Shiver Baron Staff, you have a chance to freeze. On base, it's 100%. You can, of course, stack it with Uranium. So on the Dark Lord, it's up to 111% chance to freeze, which is really good, because obviously bosses will have increasing resistance as you get later into boss rush. The Tavern Owner. The one option is to stack him with Uranium, as well as the Wraps, so that he goes second, so it goes the Dark Lord, then the Tavern Owner on most bosses. On the ones that outspeed the Tavern Owner, it still goes Dark Lord, the boss, the Tavern Owner, and you still have a fair chance to freeze. So we can get up to 157% chance to freeze, so an extra 45-ish%. Could be worthwhile, I'm not too sure. The other option is just to completely gear him out as survivability. So still keep the Shiver Baron Staff, but with shields, use the Crystal God Guard, use the Evercrag armor, and then attach some copper bracelets so he can't get statused. And using that, your chance to freeze is still higher because of the gem slots and obviously the uranium plating on the gear, but it is obviously significantly less. It's, what's that, roughly 1/7, if I did my math right? Or 1/6? I think it's about 1/7. So, the question is, do we favor freezing the bosses or keeping him alive? Because the Dark Lord can't protect both the Mystic and the Tavern Owner, and using gear outside of the Evercrag and Crystal Guard, you don't have the damage reduction and you don't have the high HP pool. I should probably turn off relics so you can see properly. That's the question we're facing. I'm probably going to try the Wraps first, and then if we end up wiping, I can swap over to a more defensive setup. Other than that, I've tried to maximize their magic damage. Ooh, there we go. So 173% on the Mystic, and then the Wizard has 280. I'm using the Wizard over the Mystic because he has 2 slots, meaning I can stack both the Circuit of Binary for 100% boost, as well as the Flask to reduce his cost. So for the majority of bosses, this Wizard should be able to one-shot them. For any of the 2-phase bosses, this Mystic should be able to clean up the second phase before they actually get turned. And then the Huntresses are still around to mark, since it does boost the damage of Judgment. What about the script? Well, I've reworked it again, made it a bit more specific to their positions. So, for instance, our mark term is just, if there's no status effect, they will mark, and then they will defend because we don't need them attacking. In fact, do they have, what weapons do they have? They have Bit Blades for Withering. Are we at cap? I think we were close. Yeah, we're 90%. If I'd swap the equipment on the Tavern Owner, I believe we're under, yeah, only 85%. Not a big deal, but still something. I think that's another decent idea, is keeping everyone around so that you can keep the Withering effect going. Other than that, back to the script. So what else do we have? Okay, so I couldn't be bothered figuring out the actual ranks of the different bosses. Like the initial Dark Lord has a different rank to the last boss. So I just set up hierarchy. They'll always target the highest rank enemy, which means that the Vacation Lord should be played around. So both the Mystic and Wizard, because they have the Glass Warden, they will only use Judgment. As for 5 and 6, because they have the Shiver Baron Staff, we just want them default attacking. Other than that, I just loaded up. These can all be deleted. I just ended up putting the max amount of scripts to see how many I would need. But yeah, so I think this script should do it. Everything specific to their position. Because again, this is the setup that plays around the Dark Lord and his Savior the best. So our weak links are the Wizard, Mystic, and Tavern Owner. I'm pretty sure the Tavern Owner is going to get KO'd, which means there's no point in speeding and increasing the Shiver Baron status effect. So it's probably better to add defensive Bogo Try, because also we get the clock boost using the Tavern Owner. On that, I will just set up these scripts and then we'll give it a go. Also, just using the magic damage pet. Boosting your magic attack is the highest priority since it allows you to outscale the damage reduction on the bosses, and you can deal the most damage through Judgment. So right now the Wizard is doing, what is it, roughly 3 times the boss's HP, and then the normal Mystic is doing almost 2 times. Plus then you throw in the Mark multiplier, doing a lot of damage. Also, the reason for 2 Huntresses is because one's going to run out of mana. We can't effectively stack damage reduction and status resistance and be able to constantly cast Mark, and they should just casually swap between one another. Anyway, let's give it a go. Make sure everything's working first off, which it's not because you defended. Why are you defending? Of course, it's right in front of me. These all need to be self instead of ally, because it's detecting an ally in the position. So that should be fine now. Self, self, self. Let's just make sure. Perfect, so they're attacking, he's freezing, it's good to see. And we should be able to get at least up to our current PB. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it, and we'll see. Oh, never mind, I noticed the floor. So they're not marking because of the freeze. And of course, it wasn't simple. So, hopefully this mechanism works. Enemy any mark is also wrong. Should be self, position, 1, any debuff. Okay, so the Huntress in 1 will try to mark. If it can't mark, it will defend. And the second Huntress will only use its mark if there's an ally with mana less than 5%. And then the second Huntress will only use mark if there's an ally with MP less than 5%. So this should only trigger when the first Huntress is out of mana. If not, they will defend, because that's the only other clause that suits them. Let's give it a go and see. Good Lord, maybe? Oh, okay, they didn't mark, so curious. Why didn't they use any debuff? Self in position 1, any debuff, because I can't use a specific skill, because it will only let you use skills relating to the character you're selecting. So in this case, they should only be skills that can directly affect the self, so like defend, sharpen, any sort of buffs. But I was hoping any debuff would sort of alleviate this issue. Because for instance, if I were to set as default attack, then it would just default attack anything. At least that's my understanding. Okay, let me think about it some more. Okay, I'm super confused. I've just been trying random selections, so to speak. Unfortunately, we do have to wait. We get to a boss that can survive. This Huntress is marking, but this Huntress isn't. And I'll show you why that's weird in a second, once I show it happening. Essentially, the only one I really changed is the first one. But anyway, so that first Huntress marked, the second Huntress didn't. Which is kind of what we want. I don't know if the second Huntress will trigger though. And the reason this is weird is the script. Enemy status equals negative any debuff. So that's triggering the first Huntress to mark, but then the second Huntress is still defending. Which I don't quite understand why. It doesn't really make sense. I guess it's one negative. That could be it. So as long as it only has one negative status effect, it's using the debuff. I will try it for the most part. I didn't think that would be the one to work. I was just seeing if any of these sort of random things, so like the strongest single target attack, strongest attack, or any skill, any debuff, would actually make the Huntress use Mark. And for whatever reason, any debuff was the right one? Or did I actually set it to marked? If I set it to mark... Okay, let's continue testing. But I think I set it to any debuff. If I set it to mark, will they both mark? No, the second one still doesn't mark. You mark the... You don't even mark the barbecue. Well, that's understandable because the barbecue doesn't have a negative status effect. But it must be counting only a single status effect. So if the enemy has one status effect, it's going to mark. That's a bit of an issue on the late game, because if we're not freezing the boss, it looks like mark isn't going to work. But at the same time, it somewhat works for what we're trying to accomplish. From that testing, it should hopefully mean if the first Huntress runs out of mana, the second Huntress will start marking again, because the enemy will have one negative status effect. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I'm just going to let it play out now and see how far we can get with this setup, and then if it does cave because the tavern owner dies, I will try with defensive gear, see if we can push a bit further. I want to test this. So this Huntress would mark because of the negative debuff. So if I do that, it marks, Judgment clears. Now this guy doesn't have a negative debuff, so this Huntress, or either Huntress, won't actually mark it. We're going to actually defend here rather than using Judgment. We're going to hit him to freeze him, or try to freeze him, I guess. Neither of them use mark, which is fine. You can still test it. Hit, defend, and you use mark. So it has to be single status effect. That is just so interesting. It's perfect for what we want, but it is just interesting. It means I can utilize that in different ways too. Okay, no, but now I'm curious. So one other thing. If it's just counting a single status effect, we defend with everyone and just mark him with the Huntress. Is the second Huntress going to use the mark? No. Okay, so the game's smart enough to know it's a debuff and try not to reapply it. In this scenario. In the scenario of selecting any debuff, right? Or just mark does not count as a negative effect. I guess mark doesn't count as a negative status effect. That can't be right. Because I know, because usually I do the exclamation mark to blacklist it, and I use none. So if there's yes. Or do I just do equal? I think I just do equal. If there's no status effect on the boss, it marks. I've never blacklisted or tried to use negative. So mark as a debuff is not negative. That's the only way this works out. Okay, I need to think about how we can use that, because it's perfect for the stage 1, so to speak. So they'll mark the boss if it's frozen, but they won't mark the boss if it has just mark or nothing, which is not useful in the late game, because we will eventually get to the point where we can't freeze every boss, and those are the bosses we really want to mark for the extra damage. At the same time, I want to conserve the defend clauses because I don't want both Huntresses acting. The easiest way to do it would probably just be move one Huntress down and have it go Huntress, Wizard, Huntress, Mystic. But then I am slightly slower on some of the bosses. Oh, it's just so interesting that marked is not a negative effect, apparently. So, despite our findings, I decided just to swap it back and go Huntress, Wizard, Huntress. So I've just used the rank hierarchy again, so we'll just try to mark the highest ranked enemy first, and then on the Vacation Lord should go Huntress, mark the Vacation Lord, and then the Wizard will kill him, and then we'll move on. And this also sort of just plays better in the late game, because the Huntress will always be buffing the Mystic's damage on the final boss, and the Good Lord if we don't quite have enough damage, I guess. But it's just so interesting, I didn't expect it to work that way. Anyway, back to boss rush. Everything should be working. We should be good to go. Let's see how far we get. Okay, so we're coming up to beating the PB, which is really good. The comp has fallen apart, obviously, so we lost not only the Tavern Owner, which was expected, but also the second Mystic. So I was a bit off in my thought that the Dark Lord could protect two people as long as they're on either side. It's unfortunate, but it seems like because of the side he's on, he can't. So I'm curious to see where this comp ends up, but I think I have one last idea that is just going to do it for us. Right, so it looks like our run is starting to come to an end. We're starting to take a bit of chip damage from the Dark Lady. So because she outspeeds our Dark Lord, and her damage has been racking up as we get further and further into boss rush, you can now see our Huntresses are starting to take a bit of damage despite having max damage reduction. So this does mean eventually one of them will get KO'd and the Dark Lord will fail to save someone and we'll start losing all our party members. If it was just the Wizard and the Dark Lord left, we could probably still go pretty far just off of the Judgment damage. We're still out-damaging all the HP pools, so this final boss and the Good Lord have damage reduction, but we're still able to one-shot them, especially if we get a mark off. But unfortunately, like I said, we're starting to take that chip damage and we will eventually just run out of HP and lose our party members. So, probably a little bit further. It's still a really good run. We're 125,000, so an extra 50,000 floors over our previous PB. I do have another comp in mind though already that I look forward to trying out. It's going to have to wait a little bit, unfortunately, because obviously this run alone has taken, does it say the final time? No. But you can see that it's 10 hours between when we lost our Mystic. If I actually end the run, which is a point in continuing, I'm sure everyone's curious to see how far we get, but I can beat this, I know I can. So I'll end it and we'll see how long. So we spent... It did not say. Okay, we'll do the math. It was 125 divided by 5, so it's 50. Did I do that right? No, not 50, it's 25. So we spent 25 hours in boss rush to get to our new PB of 12,457 bosses. So pretty good. I still think I can come up with a better comp than this one. Although it's good to see that this can really go far. A couple of issues. I'm pretty sure the Mystic is actually redundant. For one, if I set it up better, we can maximize our regen and also our turn pacing. So, for instance, right now the Dark Lord goes first, then the Tavern Owner, and then our Auto Proceed. And usually this Wizard finishes off the bosses, meaning that our round consists of 4 moves, and every 6 moves is counted as a full round. So in other words, every boss we fight is 2/3 of a round, and then every 2 bosses is a round and a half, or it's just over 1 round. Did I do that right? Either way, if we micromanage everything a lot better, so for instance moving stuff around, we can actually get it so that we're regenning HP after every boss, which would be a really good thing. It would help increase the survivability of a Huntress, and I also want to sort of figure out some better units to use. I think the Nurse is actually going to be really viable in terms of just really pushing the run to its maximum. But we'll leave it there. Pretty happy with how far we got, and yeah, I'm going to do some more testing and come up with something a little bit better. See you in the next one.